Good morning to all of the students of this course. We will continue the discussion on economic cooperation in ASEAN, and today's topic is sub-regional cooperation in ASEAN. I wish you are in a good health and this video finds you in a good condition. Before we start the discussion, I would like to remind you about the final exam. The date for the final exam is from 5th of May to 15th of May. Hopefully you guys can prepare and study in advance. Now, before final exam, we will have sessions of class projects. Now, you guys have been distributed into different groups. So I would like to use this opportunity also to remind you about the groupings. Let us start with the course of Kerjasama Ekonomi di ASEAN 2020. I'll read you the name of the members. Group 1, Ade R. Priastika, Lukas A. Singarimbun, Ferawati, Muhammad Sihab Fauzi, Evan C.C. Nainggolan. So you are in the group 1. Group 2, we have Fani Khairani, Fawaz Muhammad, Tutan Prakasita, Fitri Putri, and Naufal Falah. So please start to contact your friends. Group 3, Fatimah Nawal, Tiffany Terianti, Alvin F. Basundoro, Adani R. Sutarjo, and Lutfiah Farharani. I'm sorry for the mistaken pronunciation. Now group 4, Aldo Raffi, Kaila Aidisa, Mauriska Kalista, Audrey Samantha, Avitania P. Pramesti. So although we are working from home, you are studying from home, please do not hesitate to contact your friend. Yeah? You can contact them via social media, Facebook, Instagram, or directly phone them or text them through WhatsApp. Now group 5, Anis H. Ayuning Tias, Dikit Pratikta, Zikri Rahmanda, Tinon Sekaring Rum, Pratama Khalik. Yes, that was group 5. Now group 6, Syahsam Ihza, Caroline Minerva, Farah Syabila, Adinda Putri, and Davin Y. Darmawan. Motorcycle. Group 7, Brigita Kalina, Perdana Karim, Adisna Kusuma, Nurul Komariah, and Aldo Brio. Now the last group, group 8, Muhammad Rizka, Yasar Purwa, Veronica Danika, I Putu Gede Eka Praptika, and Marta A. Indriana. That's all for the course of kerjasama ekonomi di ASEAN. Please do not hesitate if you have questions on how to manage the class project. You can contact me or your tutor, Mas Purwa. Okay, now for the course of economic cooperation in ASEAN 2020, we also have class project. Please also contact Mbak Karina Devira if you have some questions. Group 1, the members are Ponang Titian, Teresia Rida, Genesia Ginting, and Samuel Giovano. Okay, if you drop the class also, do not hesitate to inform us, notify us about your plan. Group 2, Rifaya S. Putri, Fukuda Chinatsu, Cesar Leonardo. Group 3, next, Yudi M. Farhan, Farel Arseno, Nur Melani, and Nina Montagu. Group 4, Fadil Haidar, Rania Rizkia Dinda, Dana Laras, and Noel Hasintongan. Group 5, Karina Nurwidodo, Chloe Rosina Leke, Reynard Pradana, and Handono Eka Paramagarjito. Now group 6, we have Haidar Nur M. Reska, Ashley Ramachandran, Athala Tiara Alifa, and Raihan Wira Pradipta. Group 7, we have Reina Kato, Aditya Wibowo, Takuhiro Yonebayashi, and Dennis Hilbering. The last group in this course, Molly Elizabeth Ellen Glendening, Trisikit Baskoro, Joe Tomai, and Damaris Tama. Okay, so don't forget to take note on this grouping and start to contact your friend, discuss about how to do the homework for this class project, and prepare the file of your presentation, and also if you want to create or produce a video, then you can do that. Okay, let's start the discussion today. Let's go to the first slide. The meeting today is the 9th meeting, sub-regional cooperation in ASEAN. Some of you might have heard about sub-regionalism before. So in this opportunity, we would like to take a look at the development of sub-regionalism in ASEAN. What is the rationale behind the establishment of different sub-regionalism in ASEAN? What are the significances of this opportunity, this collaboration? Who are get involved? How is the mechanism, and so on and so on. Go to the second slide is for the group project, the third also. So please go to the fourth slide, slide number 4. Now there you see the picture. It's quite an old picture, coming from the year of 1997, when we still had the old leaders such as Presiden Suharto in Indonesia, Prime Minister Chuan Lik Pai of Thailand, also Prime Minister Mahathir Mohamad of Malaysia. Now this picture was taken in Kuala Lumpur during the summit in 1997, and at this leaders meeting, ASEAN agreed upon the continuity of sub-regionalism improvement. Well, sub-regionalism in ASEAN has been established several years before this summit, and they agreed to continue the progress and achievements of the sub-regionalism. Here the statement, it stated that ASEAN fully implement the AFTA, ASEAN Free Trade Area, previously has been established in early 1990s, and accelerate liberalization of trade in services, realize the ASEAN investment area by 2010, and free flow of investment by 2020. Now, in its development, last time we have discussed about ASEAN Economic Community, whereby that time in 1997 there was no conception of ASEAN Economic Community yet. Later in 2003, later in 2007, after the ASEAN Charter, we established the conception of ASEAN Economic Community, and has been put into force, or is effective, started in 2016. Intensify and expand sub-regional cooperation in existing and new sub-regional growth areas. So in 1992, 1993, and 1994, they have established at least 3 sub-regional cooperation areas. Further consolidate and expand extra ASEAN regional linkage for mutual benefit, cooperate to strengthen the multilateral trading system, and reinforce the role of business sector as the engine of growth. So, sub-regionalism proposed by ASEAN is not merely the project of the governments. It is also rely to the further integration to the global market through multilateral mechanism, also in compliance with WTO, used to be known as GATT, and also to endorse the active participation of the business sector. Business sector is very important. They are the engine also for the growth. So you have to incorporate business sector, private sector, governments, and also the society. Don't forget about the small and medium enterprises. That is the arrangement, the commitment of the ASEAN leaders until today. to support sub-regional cooperation because of several reasoning that we will talk afterward. Now let us go to the slide number 5. Next slide. Here is the collection of sub-regional cooperation arrangement that we are currently developing in Southeast Asia. And if we want to count from 1992 to 2020, I'm sorry. Yeah, if we count from 1992 to 2020, there are at least 5 or 6 regional cooperation that has been established. But for today, I think we will be focusing more into 3 because these 3 represent different sub-regional areas, and still effective today. So some of the example here I put there, the Greater Mekong Sub-region, GMS, and also you can see the logo there. Also Ayeyawati Chao Phraya Mekong Economic Cooperation Strategy, or ACMEX, the extension or the derivation actually of from the GMS, Greater Mekong Sub-region, and also BIMP IAGA, the Brunei Darussalam Indonesia Malaysia Philippines is ASEAN Growth Area. BIMP IAGA involving 4 ASEAN member countries in the eastern part. Is the eastern part of the ASEAN region, and the Indonesia, Malaysia, Thailand Growth Triangle, IMTGT. Those are for sub-regionalism. Okay. We will merge the Greater Mekong Sub-region with the Ayeyawati Chao Phraya Mekong Economic Cooperation Strategy in our discussion. Now, let us go to the slide number 7, the historical and geographical context. Why is the sub-regional cooperation important? Now, historical and geographical context, number 1, natural geographic wise. Of course, some of the region in Southeast Asia were known as the area of commerce and political strifes of different kingdoms in the region, and throughout the history they have been interacting each other between them. For example, in the mainland, or let's say we can say the Mekong Basin, the interaction between the Siamese and even kingdoms before Siam, such as Sukhothai and Ayutthaya. They are involved in trades and in diplomatic relations with the Burmese kingdom, with the Lao, also with the Khmer. The Khmer Empire once also uh, ruled vast area in the Mekong Basin. We also don't forget about the role of Dai Viet in Vietnam, Champa Kingdom, also once very powerful kingdom that ruled the area and promote trade, not only in the Mekong Basin but also in the other area in Southeast Asia. And the usage of the transportation through the riverways were very effective during the time to promote trade and commerce. Yeah. They had conflicts, wars, but that proves the the intensified interactions. Yeah, and it has also create some of these interactions between them, creates a very distinctive cultural and technologies that they share among them. Yeah, and this natural region, in the second point, has shaped distinct technologies and cultural features that says common traits. Yeah, the usage of riverway, to transport the products of agriculture, for example, by those petty traders, yeah, and also distinct technology, cultural features. Yeah, they share some of similarities in their carvings and their details, yeah, of architectural features, dance, traditional costume. Yeah, the influence of geographical area that binds them in this natural interactions between them, hundreds or thousands of years prior to the involvement of Western colonialization in the region. And also don't forget that some of Southeast Asian countries are very big in terms of territorial span. Yeah, countries like Indonesia is very big. Also, the Philippines, yeah, an archipelago from the north to the south. Countries like Thailand as well. Malaysia also consisted of two different parts: the western side of the country, the Malaya Peninsula, and the eastern part in the Borneo Island. So naturally, there are several areas, several provinces, several states that has this huge geographical distance from the core of the economic activity, which are in the capital cities and surroundings. If we are talking about Thailand, the economies are pretty much the big portion of economies in Bangkok area, in Indonesia as well, concentrated in Jakarta or in Java. Let's say province in northern Moluccas island, Maluku Utara, having very far distance from Java, If you want to go to, let's say, Papua, you need 5 hours to of flight, yeah, very far away. So this geographical distance creates perhaps lack or the lack in distributions and increase the price of the commodities and so on and so forth, and it will further hinder the development if we don't create or if we don't introduce new mechanism for them to utilize the advantage, yeah, that they get from natural geographical areas or groupings, yeah, so that they can interact each other and create their own growth, yeah. People in Maluku Utara or in Sabah, also in the former Sulu Sultanate area in Mindanao, for example, and the province of Palawan, yeah, they can start to create maritime exchange and investment, yeah, support the investment among them, trades, perhaps cross-border tourism, so can create their own growth. That is the basic rationale of this point number 3 here: huge geographical distance between the sub-regions and the capital cities, affecting economic development in the outer provinces or outer area in each member states. Yeah, in Malaysia also the eastern part has this gap, yeah, of this distance, yeah, with the Malaya Peninsula. So they might want to see some other opportunities, you know, to cooperate with other region, with other area, yeah, from other countries. And fourth point, set history, cultural, and linguistic ties among neighboring communities. Let us take a look at the IMT-GT, yeah, Indonesia, Malaysia, Thailand, Golden Triangle. If we check the regions that are actively involving in this cooperation, the provinces of Indonesia in Sumatra have shared or common culture with states in Malaya Peninsula, yeah, in western Malaysia, and also in the southern of Thailand, yeah, sharing the same preference in food, also in custom, adat istiadat, also language, yeah, they speak bahasa, yeah, speak Malay, understand, yeah, each other. And before the coming of the colonialization, yeah, they were there has been established the exchange, the trade, yeah, the trades, very strong ties among them. So if ASEAN can endorse and can promote further cooperation, yeah, it will be beneficial for them. They had the modalities, yeah, they already have the social capital, cultural capital to maximize the cooperation, yeah. And sustained cross-border interaction will help building regional awareness and affinity. So if you ever heard about this proverb, tak kenal maka tak sayang, ya. So by having more interaction, yeah, it will create affinity towards other cultures, other areas. They start to know each other. Yeah, and if economic interdependency is created, it will further boost sense of belongings, that they are coming from the same root, same background, yeah, and they start to discover that, oh, there are so many cultural aspects that we share each other, and it will be beneficial for the durability and feasibility of the cooperation. Then the cooperation becomes natural. That is what we are looking for. Natural regionalism, yeah, comes from natural market. And if you can create natural market with this organic interaction, trades, cultural exchange, yeah, the governments or the states, countries has just need to regulate, yeah, and enable, provide good environment for them to exchange, yeah, services, labors, goods, investments, and create this new identity, shared identity, and at the end of the day will further strengthen ASEAN identity. Yeah, that is the historical and geographical context. I hope you can follow. If you have some questions or perhaps comments, please do let us know. Leave your comments on the comment column below, yeah, in Facebook group. Yeah, sometimes people doesn't want to comment on YouTube comment section. So I would rather suggest you to go to our Facebook group. And the next slide number 7, is political and economic. We understand that the sub-regionalism can be understood also as a geopolitical projects. Yeah, we cannot separate the moment of the creation of sub-regionalism with the end of the Cold War. Yeah, the end of Cold War provide greater opportunities to set economic the economic blocks, yeah, in many regions. Yeah. Why? Because you can relate this with the decline of the Eastern Bloc, the Soviet bloc. Those countries who used to rely on Soviet Union's assistance, yeah, and also Soviet markets, they lost the connections. Yeah, so they have to find other forum for them to be able to market their products. So countries like Vietnam will try to find other regional economic bloc to help them get more interaction to amend the decline on their trade volume. Yeah. And at the other side of the story also, it was the victory of liberal market. Yeah. So by the decline of the Soviet bloc, there are more and more opportunity for liberal market and open society to start the liberalization, deregulation, and harmonization of regulations. Yeah, so it can further enable trade, international trade, the diminishing of the barriers and tariffs that will be good for world's economy. Yeah. The end of the Cold War provide greater opportunities to set economic blocks in many regions in the world, including sub-regionalism of the GMS in 1992, IMTGT 1993, and PIMP-EAGA 1994. We witness also the creation of Mercado do Sur, Mercosur in Latin America, also NAFTA, North American Free Trade Area, also the European Union. Yeah, all begins in the early 1990s. In the afterwards, after the the fall of the communist bloc. And ASEAN countries here in the second point in geopolitical projects, ASEAN countries seek for further stability and security, especially in the area that formerly had conflicts, such as in the mainland Southeast Asia. In the previous some decades before, they got their own conflicts. If you still remember the Vietnam War in mid of 1960s to mid of 1970s, started with also with the crisis in Cambodia until 1995. Yeah. So they want to rebuild the trust between them, among them, and also to revitalize economic exchange. The peace and stability can be supported by interdependency. If countries interact to each other and create interdependency in trades, in exchange of culture, in investment, it is less likely for them to actually go for an open conflict, because it will diminish the advantage that the economic advantage that they have gained. And the development of interconnected networks of economic activities will reduce the potential of future open conflicts. It's very important. Here also we experience the advancement of technologies and intensify cross-border activities. Yeah, we humanity has invented new types of vehicles. Yeah, and improve the effectivity of those vehicles so that people can be further mobile, yeah, to reach other countries. It doesn't really matter anymore. If you have the resource, you can reach any other countries in mainland Southeast Asia easily. Yeah, aviation, trains networks, cars, cross-border highways. There are so many opportunities that we have today, and also it will promote the growing of economic linkage, and it will open more opportunities for regional value chains, yeah, in production process. Countries can start to connect with other suppliers in other countries, yeah, in order to generate more efficient production process and lines. So you start to create a regional value chain. Your companies might have has the headquarters somewhere in Singapore or in Thailand, but the unit of productions you connect with craftsmen in Cambodia or in Laos, in Myanmar, or in rural Thailand, and then you bring the unprocessed handicrafts to be processed somewhere else in mainland Southeast Asia, yeah, and then you finally package in headquarter company or factory, and then you distribute that through other part in Southeast Asia. So the value chains not only happen in single country, but it's a collection of production process from many countries, because this value chain can provide more efficient cost, yeah, because of the comparative advantage. Yeah, and also cross-border trade. Yeah, we've discussed about that before, and laborers. Interesting if we take a look at the Maquiladora's plan in Mexico, yeah, bordering and also in the American side. Yeah, the cross-border labors also happens. Now here the advancement of industry might also provide the cross-border labors, yeah, and also investment and tourism. Yeah, Indonesia has established some of the initiative on cross-border tourism, yeah, especially in the northern Kalimantan, yeah, bordering with the Malaysian states over there. Point number 3, further trust for infrastructure development. Yeah, So if the potential for economic cooperation is high, you need to enable more and more interaction with providing good roads, yeah, good train networks, good aviation links, so that people can do business in the neighboring countries. Due to the gap between central and peripheral regions, also, condition of roads, ports, and airports need to be revamped or improved. Yeah, in the case of Indonesia, we see that the infrastructures in Jawa are relatively better than other islands, outer islands. Yeah. Well, in Borneo, in Sumatra, and also Sulawesi and Papua, government starts the improvement of the infrastructure. But if you can connect those infrastructure with other countries, provinces, and states, it will be beneficial for the further business activities. Yeah, there are many investment opportunities that comes from other countries as well. And promoting equitable economic development for regional business actors, especially the SMEs. Very reliable, the SMEs in Indonesia. They are very robust, good performance in productivity and in returning the investment. So SMEs will be our future backbone for the economy as well. Now, with this historical and geographical context, also political and economic context, sub-regionalism found the foundation, the reasoning, a strong and argumentative reasoning for them to improve their performance. Yeah. Now, next slide, starting from the eighth slide, slide number 8, the development of cooperation. We will take a look at the GMS, IMTGT, and BIMP EAGA. Next slide. Here is the map of the area, yeah, of the GMS and ACMEX. Here you can see some of the corridors, yeah, represented from different colors there. The pink lines is the southern corridor from Dawei there in Myanmar, go to Bangkok in Thailand, go to Phnom Penh, yeah, in Cambodia, and Ho Chi Minh City in Vietnam. So if the project is done, yeah, and it is actually, some of them has been improved, yeah, it's been done, it will ease, yeah, the movement of people. And also there, southern corridor also connect Dawei, Bangkok, Siem Reap, yeah, Ban Lung, and Quy Nhon in the Vietnamese territory. The southern coastal corridor from Bangkok, yeah, go to Southeast area to Kampong Spiu, Prea Sihanouk in Cambodia also, and finish in Nam Chan in Vietnam. In the East-West corridor, represented by the orange color there, from Myawaddy to Phitsanulok in Thailand, until Da Nang in the eastern coast of Vietnam. Go to the eastern corridor there, from Kunming further north in southern China to Hanoi in Vietnam until Nam Chan in the south, in the farthest southern part of Vietnam. The northern corridor, from Tamu go to Mandalay in Burma in Myanmar to Dali to Kunming to area in Guangxi Autonomous Region until Jinzhou, and Dongxing, in the southern part of Guangxi and central line, central corridor. You have central corridor that is connecting Vientiane to Nakhon Ratchasima in the south, nearby Bangkok, and also to Cambodia to Kampong Cham and also Phnom Penh. And the north-south corridor, connecting Bangkok, Ayutthaya in the south up to some of Laos cities and cities in southern China. Very interesting arrangement there. Now the GMS and ACMEX, GMS especially established in 1992 by countries in the Mekong Basin, with the support of the ADB, the Asian Development Bank, to enhance connectivity and economic activities throughout the region. And these GMS countries are comprised of areas in southern China, especially Yunnan and Guangxi Zhuang, also Thailand, whole of the Thailand territory, the whole of Cambodian territory, the whole of Laos, Myanmar and Vietnam, with total area of 2.6 million square kilometers. I think it is one of the biggest in sub-regionalism, and with potential market for roughly 326 million people. Very big, actually, big market, big opportunity, big area, can be easily accessed through land connectivity, with train networks and with the highway railroads. The three main objectives of the cooperation are promoting and developing commerce, improving infrastructures, and enabling private sector investment and operations. This initiative are channeled through various of corridors without neglecting the importance of sustainable development. The corridors that we have talked before. Yes, there are so many corridors. And the governance, how they govern this cooperation. Well, we go to the next slide, is slide number 11 there. It is very typical ASEAN, if we can say, when you should have the summit, the GMS summit, and just below the summit there are ministerial meeting relevant ministerial meeting, and below that you have some the senior official meeting and national committees that will act as national focal point and national operating arms, and the working groups. They work in different areas. For example, working groups that are working in tourism, in trade, in investment. And as the partner, as the regional advisor, is the ADB. Has the secretariat in the Philippines. And also ADB will give some, apart from the advice, of course, the support for the funding of some of the projects. Now, go to the slide number 12, the initiative. What are the area that they are focusing into? They have agricultural sector, they have energy sector, cooperation on environment, health, cooperation and human resource development, information and communication technology, transportation, trade facilitation, tourism, and urban development. Now, every ASEAN sub-region has their own priority, their own priorities. So GMS here, for example, they have this priority to urban development. As we know that some of the corridors are linking big cities. So urban development on the satellite cities and other cities are becoming important. We don't see this kind of approach in other sub-regional. Well, in IMTGT we have the initiative on green city instead. So different priority, of course. What in accustom, or it is accustomized with the need for different countries, and they face different challenges, they face different situation. And here on the slide number 13 you can see the proportion or the configuration of the different corridors between Cambodia, People's Republic of China, Laos, PDR, Myanmar, Thailand, and Vietnam. You can see the proportion of the corridors. For example, the corridor of northern corridor, north-south corridor, eastern corridor, east-west corridor. This different corridor will have different proportion of the focal points, who will build that proportion, and to whom these roads will give benefit the most. China also have a good portion of involvement, especially in the northern economic corridors. In north-south economic corridor, there in the eastern part, China has 59% of proportions. In central corridor, 49%. In the north-south economic corridor. In Southern Economic Corridor, apparently, Cambodia has a lot of proportions, 65% in inter-corridor link. In southern coastal, Thailand has dominant proportion. In northern sub of the southern economic corridors, Cambodia has 65%. Yeah. And the next slide will be about the distribution of funding sources, for transport investment project in the Regional Investment Framework Implementation Plan 2020. Now let us take a look at the source of the funding. 78% apparently coming from GMS countries, through their national budget. Meanwhile, development partners and private sectors reaching 15% of the fundings of those corridors and initiatives. And the ADB, ASEAN Development Bank, reaching 7% of the total budget for the corridors. Quite proportional, but also we don't forget about the foreign debt as well. It's being used to build the corridors in other countries in Southeast Asia too. There are so many. And the questions about the BRI, Belt and Road Initiative fundings should be further discussed, I think, in ASEAN sub-regionalism, because those fundings also can be utilized. We go for the next slide, slide number 15 here, is about the perspective of different countries involving in GMS. From Thailand perspective, they plan to, and in the process of relocating production bases to border areas for easiest access to more affordable labor. Also here, I think, raw material and markets. Also, GMS can serve a platform to promote tourism and diminish illegal trade through free flow of goods or liberalization. That is what Thailand see. Meanwhile, for the Vietnamese, in the brink of the collapse of the Soviet Union, Vietnam renewed its foreign policy by diversify international cooperation and revitalize its multilateralism approach under Politburo Resolution number 13 of May of 1988. Hence, active participation in sub-regional economic cooperation is very good, according to this policy. And previously, Vietnam also had launched the Doi Moi economic reform in 1986, and it further increased the compatibility of Vietnamese economy to the world market. From the People's Republic of China, the perspective is that China has interest in the development of GMS and ACMEX, due to geographical connection between its southern areas, such as the Yunnan province and Guangxi Zhuang autonomous region, and success development of infrastructure in the Mekong region will greatly benefit ASEAN, China Free Trade Area, and the Chinese BRI agendas. Yeah. So there are some of the perspective of these different countries. Excuse me. Now continue to the BIMP-EAGA, Brunei, Indonesia, Malaysia, Philippines, East ASEAN Growth Area. Yeah, and here you can see the map. Yeah, that this cooperation comprise of very vast area. Yeah, and we can sense about the importance of the maritime corridor here because of the archipelagic condition of this area. Yeah, the whole island of Borneo, Sulawesi Islands, Malucus Islands, Papua, yeah, western part of the Papua Island, and also Mindanao. They're in the Philippines, and here is the Palawan. Yeah. Now next slide number 17. BIMP-EAGA established in 1994 by Brunei, Indonesia, Malaysia, and the Philippines to boost economic interdependency, yeah, in the areas that are famously rich of natural resources, yeah, incredibly rich of natural resources, palm oil, minings, yeah, and also fisheries. And BIMP-EAGA comprises of Brunei Darussalam, the Indonesian provinces of Kalimantan Barat, Kalimantan Utara, Kalimantan Timur, Kalimantan Selatan, Kalimantan Tengah, all of provinces in Kalimantan, Sulawesi Selatan, Tenggara, Tengah, Gorontalo as well, Sulawesi Utara, Maluku Selatan, West Papua, and Papua. Many areas in Indonesia, and the Malaysian states of Sabah and Sarawak, and the Federal Territory of Labuan, and the Philippines regions of Mindanao and Palawan, and it comprises of 1.6 million square kilometers with a potential market of 17 million people. Very big market as well. And the next slide, in slide number 18, about the governance, it is resembling the GMS side, yeah, with small tweaks here and there. Leader summit still in the top of the structure. All of the political, yeah, clearance, yeah, has to be done in leaders summit. Under that, ministerial meeting and local government forum, yeah, it is very important. The governors, yeah, the maybe in Malaysia Menteri Besar. Under ministerial meeting, you have a senior official meeting, and their counterpart from business sector, BIMP-EAGA Business Council, and you have also advisory connection, consultative connection with ADB regional advisors and development partners. And for the operating arms, yeah, under senior official meetings, you have BIMP-EAGA Facilitation Center and the focal point, the BIMP-EAGA National Secretariat. Yeah. Once again, it resembling ASEAN pattern of governance. Yeah. Any other functional cooperation in ASEAN also resembling this kind of patterns. Yeah. This is what we find from some of the research, other research in ASEAN cooperation. Here, the PIMP existing economic corridors. At the moment, they have two big corridors. Number one is the West Borneo Economic Corridor, yeah, dominated by the interaction on petroleum and natural gas business, yeah. And they have traditional border crossing points for trade because of the land connection and investment also, and petroleum and natural gas, palm oil, light manufacturing, tourism, and wood products. And the routes, yeah, are from Pontianak to Kuching in Malaysia, Kuching to Bandar Seri Begawan of Brunei Darussalam, Bandar Seri Begawan to Kota Kinabalu of Malaysia, and Muara to Labuan. Yeah, this is the route. And in the other side of the area is the Greater Sulu Sulawesi Corridor. Yeah, and it is dominated by maritime connections. Maritime corridor for port and port services and shipping for the cargoes, agriculture and aquaculture products, tourism and fishing coral triangle. They have this fishing coral triangle because they have the world's richest marine biodiversity. And the routes are from Palawan to Sabah, from Zamboanga Peninsula to Sabah and Davao, and General Santos to North Sulawesi. We learned that from North Sulawesi to General Santos, we have Roro cruise, yeah, the ship, roll on, roll off. Yeah, it's very important to bring the commodities from Sulawesi to southern Philippines and vice versa. Yeah, but lately it has some difficulties. Sorry, it has some difficulties because of the volume of the commodities that they ship, yeah, transport from Sulawesi to the Philippines. Sometimes when shipping products, yeah, they don't get enough products to ship back, so the retroactive or reciprocal volume is not equal sometimes, both from Philippines to Indonesia, or Indonesia go back to the Philippines. This create inefficiency in the transport. Hopefully, both governments can think how to enable or to increase the productions in both sides. So the Roro shipment can be very efficient and effective. And in the future, there will be the third corridor, which is called the third economic corridor, partly because of the Indonesian government's plan to have new capital, yeah, in eastern Kalimantan. We learned that the government gave hints where the capital will be. It's located nearby Penajam Pasir. Here, yeah, around in between Balikpapan and Samarinda, yeah. The new economic corridor will include the new capital city of Indonesia, connected to other 4 provinces of Central Kalimantan, East Kalimantan, North Kalimantan, and South Kalimantan. And the corridor will further integrate Kalimantan to Sabah, through the new road in Tanjung Selor. So quite an opportunity, not only for other provinces in Indonesia, but also states in Malaysia to have this connection, because with the establishment of new capital city, maybe the economic activity will be increased, and will be the how do you call, the trigger for further development. Now let us move to the IMT-GT, Indonesia, Malaysia, Thailand Growth Triangle. Here you can see the map and also the corridors. The corridors from Banda Aceh to Palembang, also Medan to Pulau Pinang, Bukit Tinggi to Malaka, and also from Suratani, to Kota Bahru there in the northern part of Malaysia, also from Perlis, Terengganu, to Melaka. Well connected with these corridors. I think it is important also to add some other corridors, because the vast area of this Malaya Peninsula and Sumatra, and also other islands, such as Bangka Belitung, Riau Islands, very important for the development and equitable economic development. Now, IMT-GT was initiated by Mahathir Mohamad, Suharto, and Juan Likpai in Langkawi 1993, to provide a framework for accelerating economic integration and provinces or states. Initially encompass cooperation of the Indonesian provinces of Aceh and Riau, including Riau Islands, Malaysian states of Kelantan, Perak, Kedah, Perlis, and Penang, and Thai provinces of Narathiwat, Patani, Yala, Songkhla, and Satun. So initially was pretty much limited, to fewer provinces or states, but in 2020 it has now includes 10 Indonesian provinces of Aceh, Bangka Belitung, Bengkulu, Jambi, Lampung, North Sumatra, Riau Islands, South Sumatra, and West Sumatra, and 8 Malaysian states at the moment: Kedah, Kelantan, Melaka, Negeri Sembilan, Pinang, Perak, Perlis, Selangor, and also 14 Thai provinces of Krabi, Nakhon Sri Tamarat, Narathiwat, Patani, Patalung, Satun, Songkhla, Trang, Yala, Chumpon, Ranong, Suratani, Ponga, and Phuket. It comprises of 615,000 square kilometers, with a potential market for 81 million people. Now the governance. You have ministerial meetings and governors forums under the summit, of course. They set the policies for local government level, provide political support for the programs. More likely being provided also by the IMT-GT summit. Also senior official meeting, SOM, setting implementation priorities and directions to ensure coordination. And National Secretariat, the NS, acting as national focal point for the coordination, monitoring, and executing the operationalization. And lastly, the working groups, serving as the implementation arms, in the focus area of cooperation and initiative. And the initiative itself, IMTGT has 7 priorities. According to the implementation blueprint of 2017 to 2021, agriculture and agro-based industry, one of the priorities, including agriculture, livestock, and fisheries. Also, the development and promotion of tourism in the tourism focus area. Halal products and services. This is the unique feature of this sub-regionalism. You don't have this in any other sub-regionalism in ASEAN. Economic activities based on halal practice, halal tourism, halal products, certification, and so on and so forth. And transport and ICT connectivity, infrastructure development for transportation and ICT. Trade and investment, facilitation for freer movement of goods, services, and investment. Promotion of renewable energy and sustainable development. It's very important for the long term of development. And education, facilitation for improving labor skills. In order to increase the wealth of the sub-region. These 7 priorities has been established to be achieved and to be monitored from 2017 to 2021. And here in previous achievement, in 2016, you can see some of the increase of the domestic arrivals of tourists. In Malaysia, steep increase. In Thailand, in Indonesia also moderate increase from 2008 to 2014, 2015. Steadily increase in domestic arrivals within the IMTGT, and international arrivals in Indonesia steadily increase, not so much, not so steep. In Thailand, quite good improvement. In Malaysia, a little bit inconsistency, but hopefully with the latest data in the new improvement, all of the graphic will be better. And here in the slide number 26, it is the realized investment in the IMTGT in the Golden Triangle. Quite a good improvement from 2010 to 2015 in the Indonesian side. It does mean IMTGT give very good impact to the Indonesian economy, especially economy in Sumatra. And if it can be continued, it will be beneficial for the whole society, in the whole community, ASEAN community. Now, there's only 3 sub-regional cooperation, the highlights of them. And if we go to the conclusion in slide number 27, we can say that Dan and Richter's argument about developmental regionalism can be proven, yeah, that sub-regional cooperation are usually aims to facilitate capacity building to accelerate development process for periphery regions, can be provinces, can be states, yeah, in order for them to be able to catch up with the core regional economic zones. Yeah. Some countries practice economic centralization, yeah, decades ago, and it is now the opportunity to spread out the economic benefits for all, especially for the countries in peripheral regions. Yeah. And according to Dan and Richter, what we see in ASEAN regional, sub-regional cooperation, I do agree with them that there are several capacity building that has become the pattern for them. Every sub-regional cooperation will follow this trend, yeah, this trajectory. The development capacity building process includes improvement in the following aspects. First, institutional capacity. It means the governance. Yeah, it means the cooperations between different bodies, different operating arms in local level. Also the cultures, also the identity, sense of belongings, regional awareness, a part of institutional capacity. The industrial capacity is about the capacity to produce effectively and in an efficient way of productions for different commodities, and technocratic capacity in order to level, yeah, the quality of services, by the local government, yeah, the states apparatus, the ASN in Indonesia, ya, aparatus sipil negara, civil servants. The next is human capacity, education, the skills, understandings, language, and so on and so forth. Health, yeah. Sustainable, and the last is sustainable development capacity, how they can ensure that the development projects that they do will not hamper, or they will not distract environment, because it's very important for the future, for the younger generations in the future. These five characteristic of developmental regionalism is the core of ASEAN sub-regionalism. So, as every ASEAN sub-regionalism will aim, they are aiming to follow this developmental approach. Yeah, and the last slide in slide number 28 are some suggested reading materials that you can read to enrich, yeah, our discussions. Okay, so that's all for the material for today. I hope you can follow the arguments, yeah, and the explanation. If you have some question, please do not hesitate to left your comments and questions in the comment section below, yeah, in the Facebook group, and also please don't forget about the class project. Okay, so keep up the spirit. Thank you very much for joining the course, and see you later.